happen if I have a crash? What is the scenario? What can I do to improve my chances of surviving a crash? And that's mainly what we're going to be speaking about, just a few ideas, something to tickle our thoughts and maybe think about. And perhaps that will help us in the unlikely event that we're in a situation like that. Maybe it'll come back and help us. So let's see. So I'm sure we all watch a lot of television programs. There are lots and lots of TV programs on survival, right? Can you think of a few? I'm sure many of you have seen this one over here. Right? Bear Grylls? Love this guy. This guy is great. He does all kinds of tricks. And you have a lot of programs on Discovery and all kinds of science programs where they show all sorts of how to make fire and so on and so forth. It's fantastic. And there's one of those survival kits. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. But in the aviation industry, the commonest place where we find anybody talking about survival is when we actually travel in an airline, going from place to place. We have the cabin crew comes and then talks about in case there's an emergency and the plane goes down, how do you wear your life jacket? Don't wear your heels, jump off the plane without breaking your legs, and so on and so forth. How to use a life raft and all that stuff. But that's a typical briefing, pre-flight briefing, really, in many ways, and how to use the oxygen mask and all this stuff. We tend to think this won't happen to me, right? Of course it's not going to happen to me. That's a very, very common thought. I know, gosh, I heard that person crashed over there. Must have been a terrible pilot. I'm sure they did that and this, and then we get into this analysis of what could have been done right and so on and so forth. But the reality of the situation is as you were rightly saying earlier, 80% of, Karen was mentioning 80% of the IFR, in IMC conditions, accidents are fatal. So when we walk to an aircraft, we should actually have that thought that we are walking into an environment that we're not designed to be. We don't have wings, right? So we're creating these things for ourselves. It's important to remember that whole idea that it won't happen to me is one of the hazardous attitudes. I'm sure you must have seen these 5 hazardous attitudes in many, many, many presentations, right? It won't happen to me is typically one of those hazardous attitudes that you really want to avoid. So let's say we think it could happen to me. So how do I prepare myself for it? I want to show you a few pictures. And I'd like you to take a look and see what type of planes these are and what type of environment they've crash landed into. Really everyday planes. Look at this nice grassland over there, and this one over here is just a little forest. It landed over there. This one's nicely sitting on top of a bush. Into a ditch with water. On field, sugarcane field, lake, even on the beach. Right. Do you recognize this one? Yeah. So it doesn't matter how.
Tell us what that is.
Huh?
Tell us what that is.
Yeah, what is that? I don't recognize it.
This is Harrison Ford recently had a crash.
Heard about that.
Right. That's his plane. It's a World War II. It's a PT-22. Yeah. So it's interesting. You see, I'm sure Harrison Ford got on a nice sunny day. He's got plenty of money to maintain his aircraft really, really well. So it's top class maintenance. I'm sure he's got the best mechanics working on it. Something went wrong with this car. There was a part of the carburetor that went wrong, and the engine quit. So of course the NTSB investigation, if you actually read about it, it says it wasn't pilot error. He did everything he could and got the plane down.
He didn't land very well.
It seems I guess he did what. I mean, apparently he's an experienced pilot.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he did what best he could in the situation. And the good thing is he walked away from it with injuries.
It was a golf course.
Yeah.
Lander and Hilly.
That's the third accident. Last month. No, it's true. It's very true. Yeah.
This thing?
Yeah. He should be.
He's been involved in 3.
Yeah.
He's a good pilot.
Yeah.
He's an enthusiast, right? Everything in the general aviation world.
Yeah, and I'm sure he should be happening more faster than us. He probably does. I don't know. And I'm sure if he speaks, he's got a lot of experience to share with other pilots, right? So what is general aviation survival? What's it all about? Actually, this is interesting. A significant number of general aviation fatalities could be avoided if pilots were better prepared and equipped to survive forced landing and crashes. That's from the General Aviation Joint Steering Committee. The quote from there. So what does that mean? How can we be better prepared? Really that, just a simple idea of actually thinking about it helps, on top of many other things. So preparedness at two levels. What is this? There. So you have to have the physical preparedness and the mental preparedness as well. It's not just enough. One is not enough. You have to be both ways. So what does that mean to us? It comes in various forms. Preparedness is right from the beginning, like I mentioned earlier on, from the stage before you start thinking about the flight, pre-flight. What are we doing? Simple things such as a pre-flight weather briefing and flight planning performance, which is actually required, it goes into preparation. Then we also have to think about sound aeronautical decision making as well. As much as we want to fly, I tell some of my students the best thing that you can do is actually not fly sometimes. Just let it go, because there is going to be another day for us to fly. So the excitement is always there, but I think it's better for us to make that better decision not to fly sometimes. Training is essential. We have to keep retraining continuously to equip ourselves, in terms of the skills, knowledge, and so on and so forth. And the right equipment as well, and that's really important. And we'll talk about that also a little bit in this presentation. It's a good thing for us to think about, where am I actually flying today? What kind of terrain? What's the area I'm flying over? You see, it starts from there, I think, in many ways, on being prepared for an emergency and a crash. You see? Look at this one over here, for example. I've done in several of my presentations, I've had videos of planes not being able to take off in high density altitude and crashing and so on and so forth, over trees, mountainous terrain. So once you start thinking about it, then it gives us an idea of what should I be carrying with me in this trip. What would help me if my aircraft crashes in an emergency? And that is what you want to get your thinking towards. Am I flying over a large body of water, over Lake Michigan maybe, or maybe even a larger body of water, over the sea perhaps? Am I carrying the right flotation device according to the regulations? What additional equipment am I carrying that will help in the unlikely event if my plane goes down? It's not scary, of course. But if you're going to fly over a desert region, sandy, arid area, am I carrying enough water to survive in case I go down? How far away, how long can I survive in this environment? Winter's coming, we're going to have a lot of snow. The terrain's going to change. Once you go up in the air, everything's going to look white. Then you actually have to think about this. If I have an engine failure for whatever reason, maybe icing, who knows? You got icing and the plane goes down. If I'm going to put it down safely, you might fly it down safely in the middle of somewhere. How long are you going to survive in the cold if you're not properly equipped for it? Are you wrapped up on it? That is the type of thing that you want to think about as well. And also, it's really important on longer flights, especially when you're doing cross country, you want to think about, on your flight path, where is the civilized world? How far away is it from your flight path, on both sides of your flight path, right, at any given time? So if your plane goes down, which general direction is there, a little village or a town, where can you go and get help? How long is it away from you? And that awareness has to be there, because that is actually going to be a big factor in what you're going to take with you and how you're going to survive. So that is really important. Think about that. So in terms of physical preparedness, one of the things that you want to think about is very simple things such as, do you know how to use the seatbelt in the aircraft? I know you're thinking, what's Prashant talking about? We all know how to use a seatbelt. You'd be surprised. It's not just us. Sometimes we carry passengers with us, right? So survival is not just for us. I mean, you could be carrying a loved ones, friends. No point in just you surviving. I think it would be a good idea for you to have the people that you carry survive as well. So it's a good idea for us to know how to actually open the seat belt closer to where is it relative to your, where you buckle it in. There are so many different types of seat belts. This one's got a shoulder harness attached to it in this way. One of the a good exercise for you to actually do before you take off is to actually mentally figure out where is that seat belt sitting. Is it on your left? Is it on your right? How can I put my hand on it and instantly open it in case of an emergency? And very often, look at this configuration, for example. That seat belt over there is to the inner side of the cockpit. It's not restricted by your door. Very often you might have it, because there is no regulation which says which side it should be on. Right? It could be on the left, right, wherever you want to put it. If typically on a configuration like this, the door closes it, you could be having the door restricting you from quickly opening it, right? So what is the point in you crash landing and maybe not being able to get out quickly? Maybe the plane is going to get on fire, who knows? But the idea is you want to try and walk away from it as quickly as possible. So it's a good exercise for you to think about that. And very often, sometimes we also fly in planes, newer planes for the first time. Sometimes the seat belts could be actually quite complex. Not something that you're used to. Maybe you're an experienced pilot, you've been used to so many different types of seat belts. Maybe this is the type of seat belt that you're not used to. So if you're not familiar with a particular type of seat belt, I think it's a great idea for you to actually try it a few times. How do you work this thing out? How do you tighten it up? How do you loosen it up? How do you unplug it? And that type of thing. That's really important. Not just seat belts. The next thing is you want to also think about how do you open the door as well. You'd be surprised. I got a Tomahawk that I use for training, and it's got a slightly different type of door that you have to open. It's got a latch on the top and on the side. And I take pilots in there who already have a license, and they sit in there, or maybe a flight review, and they're trying to open this door. They're completely forgotten about it. It doesn't open unless you twist them on the top as well. Unfamiliarity to how your door opens. See? And you'd think it's such a simple thing. But something that simple could actually trap you in your aircraft. And you really want to be thinking about that as well. How does my door handle actually work? Which direction do I push it? How do I open the door? Something as simple as that. And there are so many different types of doors, depending on the plane that you fly. And those are the bigger ones, of course. And I'm sure when you're in the flying an airline, they tell you if you're on one of those seats which have access to an emergency exit, are you happy to open it? And you know how to open it, and so on and so forth. Typically, what they do. See, these are so many different configurations of door handles, as you can see. Emergency exit in your own aircraft. And you're thinking, I don't fly a really big aircraft. What type of emergency exits are we talking about? If your door does not open, what alternatives do you have? It's good, your windshield. Maybe you might have a baggage door on the side. Maybe you can jump behind and open that and get out. A lot of times, baggage doors are big enough for us to crawl through. So if your doors jam for some reason, which could happen on an emergency, if you're crash landing, the whole entire airframe might warp, and now that might jam your doors from opening. Sometimes it might just be your baggage door that might be your only alternative to getting out if you can't keep your window open, right? So it's a good idea to think about that as well. And then your attire. How am I dressed? Right? You wouldn't go to an interview dressed like that, would you? Automatically we think about that. I want to go to an interview dressed looking sharp, wearing a nice, formal wear, whatever. So are you thinking about what you're wearing when you're flying? And that is important. If you're flying into cold terrain, like we looked earlier on, it's really important for you to be well insulated. You want to wrap yourself up really warm. And not just on the top, your trousers and so on also as well. If you're flying over areas of a lot of rain and the weather's very rainy, or even if you're flying over large bodies of water, have you got a vest that could be used as a flotation device as well? That's a good idea to think about. A lot of bush pilots, they actually wear vests like these when they fly. They're very cool. You can put a lot of toys around and look very cool, like a Commando or Rambo or this type, but very cool, but really useful though. And in the unlikely event, if you actually crash land somewhere, that could become really handy for you and might be the difference between life and death on something that simple. Now, of course, if you're going to be flying over those forests and bushes, you know what to wear, right? I think it would be quite difficult if you're riding one of those and you land in those areas, in a forest or a desert or, you know. So I think footwear is really important, very important when you're flying. You know, we have a rule in our school that you actually can't fly with open-toed shoes or flip-flops or sandals. You have to have proper shoes, whatever the shoes. But we're flying locally over here. But when you, as pilots, licensed pilots, fly away, are you thinking about what you're wearing? Is that going to protect you in case of an emergency? You land in a place where you have to then survive. Have you got feet protection? Are you going to be able to walk? That's going to make a difference, big difference in your survival. And then what are you going to carry? I got a few emergency kit checklists over here. And it's interesting, you know, there are so many different organizations recommending different kinds of emergency kit that you can carry with you. And there are ready-made ones in the market as well. So this one is from the American Red Cross, and they're saying take some non-perishable food, towels to keep you warm, first aid in case of an accident, batteries, tape, if you have to build stuff, right? Rain protection, flashlight, a weather radio, you got emergency survival blanket, water, multi-tool kit, and then personal hygiene items. I'm not quite sure what that is doing over there, but anyway.
It's interesting they don't have matches on that list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is interesting. I guess the Red Cross people, look at that one over there. This got matches.
Yeah.
And this one also talks about portable radio, change of clothes, food. They all have some sort of a device, can opener, or you know, a Swiss Army knife type thing. First aid kit seems to be, and they're talking about shoes. I'm not quite sure why you had to carry them with you. It'd be a good idea to put them on. Water, of course, and batteries, flashlight. This one here is another list over here. This is interesting. They're talking about carrying a fishing line and garbage bag. So they're actually keeping things in mind about how you want to keep the environment clean.
Use the garbage bag as a rain pouch.
Yes, of course. I'm joking.
Yeah.
Of course.
You know, none of them mention these personal, what are they, the spot unit where you communicate and.
Right.
You got it in there somewhere?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay, fine, I'll set it.
So they got the compass, fishing lure, and all the stuff. And I think some of these, I think we have to make the decision on what might work for us based on the trip. I don't think there is a survival kit that you can actually buy off the shelf and it's got everything. I think we have to think about where are we flying over, what is going to be useful to us. You know, because when you're flying, you also have to think about weight and balance. You know, how much actually can you carry with you, and what's useful. So there's no point in carrying a whole lot of things that's not going to be relevant to your flight. So I think we have to make that decision on what you're actually going to be carrying, what's going to be useful in case you go down. And there is also so there is the physical aspect of being prepared. What about the mental aspect? Are we mentally ready for something like that? And that is really important more than anything else. A lot of things, our success on anything depends not just on physical training or our equipment. A lot of it has got to do with how are you mentally prepared in that situation. That's a big deal, you know, in terms of your success and how you can achieve that goal. So let's talk about a scenario where you have crash landed and you are actually managed to walk out of the plane, if you're lucky enough. So what do we do once you walk out of the plane?
Take a picture.
Just the ground. You're alive.
Now, if you landed it close to a place like that, you know,
That's
that would be quite nice. You know, we don't have to worry too much about what we are going to do next. It's
Nice.
already set for us. But that doesn't happen very often, though, you know, unless you are particularly flying to a destination like that. The last time, two people who ended up getting lost and found a place for shelter didn't work out really well for them. I'm sure you heard about Hansel and Gretel, right?
Okay, I get it.
So you have to be careful about where you're walking into as well after you walk out of a plane.
Ended up okay.
At the end.
Yeah.
Ideally, I think the best thing for us in case if you have, let's say you have engine roughness, engine failure, you know, it's not always possible, but if it is possible, it would be a good option for us to try and get the plane down close to a road.